All right, so we're going to talk about a book today. And get this, it's over 400 years old. But the central question it asks, it feels like it could have been written yesterday. We're diving into the introduction to the devout life. And what makes it so revolutionary is who it was written for. Not for monks, not for hermits, but for people like you and me. You know, people with jobs, families, living right in the thick of it all. And yeah, this is the big one, right? The question at its heart. Can you really have a spiritual life, a truly deep one, when you're juggling deadlines and kids and just all the chaos of modern life? It seems impossible sometimes. But this book's answer? It's a huge, resounding yes. And it doesn't just say yes, it gives you the roadmap.
Okay, so first things first, let's talk about this phrase, a life of devotion. I mean, what does that even mean? Because for a lot of us, it probably brings up some pretty specific images. And honestly, they can be kind of intimidating.
You know the stereotype, right? The idea that to be really spiritual, you've got to step away from the world. You have to ditch the career, the social life, pretty much everything we'd call a normal life. It's often painted as this all-or-nothing deal. But the guy who wrote this book, he thought that was a massive, massive misunderstanding.
And he doesn't mince words about it either. I mean, look at this. He calls it an error, even a heresy, to try and kick the devout life out of the army, out of shops, out of royal courts, or out of a family home. He's saying, no, spirituality belongs everywhere. And you got to understand, for the 1600s, this was a mind-blowing idea. It's the whole foundation of his guide.
So who's the guy making this incredibly bold claim? Well, let's meet him. Our guide for this journey is St. Francis de Sales.
So here it is. The book itself first came out way back in the early 1600s. And he wrote it for a specific person in mind, someone he called Philothea, which is just a beautiful name that means lover of God. But Philothea wasn't a nun. She was anyone living a busy, normal life in the world who was thinking, hey, how can I go deeper spiritually without having to quit my job and abandon my family? And honestly, he was the perfect person to write this book. He was born into a noble family, so he got it. He understood the pressures of worldly life. But he was also a priest, and later a bishop, so he had this deep spiritual side. He wasn't some academic locked away in a tower. Nope. He was famous for his work out in the real world, in the place called the Chablis region, where he talked to thousands of people one-on-one. And he didn't use force or harsh arguments. He brought them back to faith just by being kind and having real conversations.
And this quote, this really tells you everything you need to know about his style. A really important guy at the time, a cardinal, basically said, look, I can argue with anyone and win. But if you want to actually change someone's heart, if you want to persuade them, you got to send them to Francis de Sales. That just perfectly captures his gift, right? It was all about gentle persuasion and real connection, not just winning a debate.
Okay, so now that we know who this guy is, let's get to the real meat of it. What is this true devotion he's talking about? Because he's super clear that most people have the wrong idea.
He lays it out with this really sharp contrast. On one side, you have false devotion. That's all about the external stuff. You know, like fasting, but inside you're just full of anger. Or saying a ton of prayers, but then you turn around and talk badly about your friends and neighbors. It's just going through the motions. But true devotion, he says that's completely different. It's a real, genuine love of God, and it shows up as this lightness, this spiritual energy. It's charity that's quick and active.
And I think this is his best analogy for it. He says, think about it like this. If charity, or love, is the fire, then devotion is the flame. It's the visible, active, energetic part of the fire. It's what takes something that feels like a duty, a commandment you have to follow, and turns it into something you do with delight. You don't just do it, you do it quickly, with joy, because you want.
And this metaphor is just fantastic. He calls devotion the true spiritual sugar. How great is that? It's what takes the bitterness out of the hard stuff, like self-discipline, and makes it easier to swallow. And on the flip side, it keeps the good things in life from making us proud or arrogant. It changes the flavor of everything.
And his whole book is just packed with these amazing, vivid images. He says devout people are like bees. They can take the bitter things in life and turn them into sweet honey. He says devotion makes anyone, in any job, more brilliant. Like putting a jewel in honey makes it sparkle more. And a strong soul can live right in the middle of the world's temptations. Kind of like a firefly that can fly through a flame without getting burned. It's just beautiful stuff.
All right, so this all sounds really nice, right? But it's easy to talk about. How do you actually start? Well, this isn't just theory. De Sales gives a super practical plan. Let's look at the very first steps.
So he breaks it down into a few clear steps. First, he says, find a guide.
You need a wise friend, a mentor, someone you trust to help you. Second, what he calls the first purgation. Basically, a deep clean of the soul from any major bad habits or sins. But it's this third step that is so brilliant. He says it's not enough to just stop doing the wrong thing. You have to work on rooting out the desire for it, what he calls your affection for that sin. It's about changing what your heart wants, not just changing your actions.
So, if you actually go on this journey, what happens? What's the payoff? Well, it's not what you might think. It is not a life of being miserable and grim. It's the complete opposite, actually.
And this brings us right back to that first misunderstanding we talked about. Someone on the outside might look and only see the hard work, the fasting, the prayers. But what they can't see is what's happening on the inside. They miss that inner warmth, that cordial devotion he talks about, that makes everything feel not just easy, but pleasant and agreeable.
And this leads to his most amazing claim. He says, "Believe me, devotion is the pleasure of pleasures." Wow. It's not some horrible chore. It's the ultimate pleasure. It's not about giving up on happiness. It's about finding the best, most lasting kind of happiness there is. He calls it the queen of virtues because it just makes everything else in your life better.
So, that kind of leaves us with a final, big question to chew on, doesn't it? What this guy was saying 400 years ago is a huge challenge to how we think about work-life balance today. He's suggesting that maybe spirituality isn't another thing we have to balance with work and life. Maybe it's the thing that integrates it all. So the question for us, I think, is, what would it mean to find our greatest pleasure, not by getting away from it all, but by diving deeper into the life we already have with more love and purpose?